Story 1. I used to teach general educational development classes to adult men in a prison. I want to preface this by saying that I do not intend for this story to be condescending in any way, as we all come from different walks of life and have different abilities and talents. I was always very proud of every one of my students. Anyway, the story: in math and geometry, we were doing a unit on surface area and volume of rectangular prisms. Most of my students tended to do better with hands-on learning, so I had a collection of wooden blocks and rulers for them to measure and then calculate. It turned out that very few of them could read a ruler aside from the inch and half-inch marks. I noticed this and quickly changed my approach, teaching them all how to read rulers and tape measures that day. We encountered the same issue with every class throughout the day, which was fine. We completed the surface area and volume project the next day. I eventually made ruler and measurement lessons a part of my standard curriculum, even though it wasn't explicitly included in the general educational development test. A significant percentage of my students were likely to join the trades, and knowing how to read measurements would be very useful for them. Story 2. The shiny side of a DVD player faces down. A woman bought a DVD player and a DVD. She returned the DVD because the DVD player wouldn't work. She called me foolish for suggesting that the DVD player reads the shiny side of the disc instead of the label side. Story 3. When I worked at a video store, a customer came in to return the copy of The Wizard of Oz that they had rented, stating, "I wanted the color version. This one is in black and white." I asked how much of it they had watched. "Just a few minutes." Story 4. I had to explain to a grown man that despite appearing to be the same size as the moon at certain times, the sun is, in fact, larger than both the moon and the earth. He couldn't understand how it was larger than the earth because it looked so small in the sky. The disbelief on his face when I explained that you could fit 1,000,000 Earths inside the sun, which only looked small because it was 93 million miles away, was remarkable. Story 5. The number of times I have had to tell people that those are not ticks on your cat or dog's stomach. They are nipples. Also, the number of men who reply, "But he's a boy? Like, my good friend, you have nipples too." Story 6. I'm not sure if they truly did not understand or if they were trying to deceive me. I went to return a case of beer I had purchased for my job because it was expired when I bought it. They kept insisting that the date on the case was the manufacturing date. I told them that was impossible. First, while some beers do use the bottling date, the format is different. Second, and most importantly, the case I swapped for the expired one had a date in the future. They continued to insist that this company uses the bottling date, not the best by date. I asked them how a case could have a bottling date that hadn't occurred yet. They did not answer but still insisted they were correct. These were adults who work at a local government liquor store. Story 7. I had to explain the difference between the southern and northern hemispheres and how the seasons differ between them. Story 8. When I worked at Walmart years ago, my coworker tried to clean a customer's forehead by licking her thumb and rubbing the mark off. She was unsuccessful. After the customer walked away, I explained Ash Wednesday to her. Story 9. I was once criticized for the instructions I provided because I assumed go to website.com was clear enough. Apparently, the user needed guidance to find the URL bar, type in the website address, and press enter. It seems this individual has never used a website that wasn't preset automatically. Story 10. When my sister and I were watching the live-action Lion King, she commented on how many trainers it took to get all the different animals to stay in their places and perform on cue. I stared at her in shock as I explained that the animals are all computer-generated imagery, and there would never be a way to get all those different animals in one place without absolute disaster. She had to look it up before believing me. My sister is 47. Story 11. A coworker of mine convinced his sister-in-law, who is a bit of a ditz, that the large bales of hay in fields are cow eggs. When she came to a company event, I was talking to her and the joke came up. Apparently, he had never corrected her, and I had just assumed he had told her the truth, expecting we would all have a laugh. Nope. I had to explain to a woman in her early 30s that cows are mammals and give birth to their babies much like humans do. In fact, the platypus and echidnas are the only mammals that lay eggs. All other mammals give live birth. In her defense, she was a good sport about it and had a great sense of humor. When I told her this, she went to my coworker laughing and jokingly reprimanded him. Story 12. I was guiding a new hire through the onboarding forms on my computer when she started tapping my monitor. I informed her that it was not a touchscreen and she needed to use the mouse and keyboard. She looked at the desk, then at me, and asked, "What's the mouse?" She was 19 and this was in 2018. I asked how she didn't know what a mouse was, and she explained that every device she had ever used was a touchscreen, and she had never had to use one before. Story 13. I once worked at a hostel in Canada. One day, a guest paid for their room with American cash. I calculated the exchange rate and gave them their change in Canadian dollars. They looked puzzled and finally asked, "Wait, there's different money here?" I had to explain that yes, even though we both use dollars and cents, Canada has its own currency. She was young but completely shocked as it hit her that she was in a foreign country. She kind of freaked out. Story 14. There is no such thing as a forever oil change. He declined our suggestion to top off his oil and that he should really get it changed every 5,000 miles. He left, and it sounded like a box of rocks while driving away. He had it towed a month later, saying it just stopped on the freeway. That car was incredibly dead. I was shocked it lasted as long as it did. The guy was about 40 years old. Story 15. I had a friend who was in a tough situation and needed a place to stay. I had to explain to her why leaving dirty dishes and empty food wrappers in her room was a bad idea. Ironically, she was complaining about the fruit flies hovering around her room. For reference, she was almost 32 years old. Story 16. A product containing bovine placenta is not vegan-friendly. All stop signs outlined in white are not optional. Sharks are not attracted to women at the beach if they are on their period. Both the yellow and fluffy white flowers are dandelions. Story 17. I said to my niece and nephew, who were 10 and 5 at the time, that this was the only time in their lives that she would be twice as old as him. My sister-in-law asked, "What about when she is 20 and he is 10? I looked at her, waiting for her to understand, but she didn't. Then I explained that there are 7 years between her and her sister. When she was 14, her sister was 7, which is twice as old. I asked how old I am now, 42, and how old her sister is now, 35. So you are not twice as old as her." She paused and then seemed to understand somewhat. Story 18. What should they put for their son's gender? The exact words are, "Do I mark male or female?" I get them mixed up all the time. Story 19. He should not put frozen hamburger patties in a toaster to unstick them. Story 20. I once had to teach a 26-year-old man who worked in a kitchen how to fry an egg. We started early and had breakfast around 10 a.m., and he always asked me to fry an egg for him. One morning, I genuinely didn't want to, so I told him to fry his own egg. He replied, "I don't know how, I don't know when it's done." I was shocked that a man who ate a fried egg every morning couldn't figure out when one was finished cooking. Story 21. I'm from Australia. I met another Australian friend in London. She was out of breath as we walked up Tower Bridge. She explained it was due to the altitude of London. "No, darling, you traveled north, not up." Story 22. My mom is a sheltered white Christian suburban woman. She homeschooled me and my siblings from the 1980s to the 2000s. In recent years, I had to explain to her that the Democratic and Republican parties essentially switched sides ideologically since the Civil War. I had to clarify that black people did not suddenly gain the same opportunities as white people after slavery. She was genuinely baffled by the Black Lives Matter movement and did not understand why anyone believed racism was still an issue. I explained how the crack epidemic was propagated by our own government to destabilize black communities and disproportionately imprison black men. Even my staunchly conservative dad acknowledged this. My mom was incredulous about all of this. She does not have dementia. Story 23. What a shooting star was. She thought it was when a star fell out of the sky. She was 29, like the stars were string lights hanging up there. Story 24. I was working for a publishing firm. A fax was coming in. and I was standing behind the office manager waiting for it to complete when my eyes idly went to her computer screen. She had the accounting program open and was manually typing an address from it into the mailing program. I asked her why she didn't just copy from the accounting program and paste it into the mailing program instead of typing the whole thing out. She stared at me blankly. She had been the office manager of this publishing firm for over 10 years and didn't know about the copy and paste functions. Hundreds of boxes of books were going out every day, and she had typed every single address by hand until that moment. Story 25. Boy-girl twins. Are they identical? You know, identical means exactly the same, right? You can see they're not carbon copies. Even little kids know boys and girls have different parts. The twins do too, which makes them not the same and, thus, not identical. Story 26. I had to explain to a 60-year-old man that his car remote key fob stopped working because the battery was dead. He knew to replace the batteries in his TV remote, but thought the car key fob would lock and unlock the car without batteries. I also had to explain that his dog's dry food was going bad quickly and attracting bugs and wild animals into his garage because he needed to close the bag and keep it in a strong container with a lid to keep raccoons out. Alternatively, he could store it inside the house where he feeds his dog. You wouldn't leave bags of cereal and chips wide open outside your house, so why do that with the expensive dog food you buy? Story 27. The other day, a customer returned some hanging outdoor lights because she wanted white and they were red. I explained to her that it was a protective film that just needed to be removed, which was literally stated on the film. Her response? Well, they were red when I plugged them in. Story 28. If you wear someone else's glasses, they are not wrong because you can't see through them. They are not made for you. Story 29. I recently had to explain to a coworker that the people who were accused of witchcraft in the past were innocent of the charges because magic is not real. I'm not sure how old she is, but I would guess she is in her mid-30s. Story 30. Someone told me that a person having a panic attack cannot recognize it, so they cannot take care of themselves. In response to the original poster saying they went to the hospital because of a panic attack, I provided references to show they were incorrect. Then they insulted me. It was frustrating. Story 31. I worked for financial advisors for 15 years. One year, I told my mom, remember, you need to get your individual retirement account contributions in before the 15th. My mom said her husband, my stepdad, hadn't decided what investments they wanted to put the money in. I told her they didn't have to decide on an investment. The money just had to be in the account. She argued, no, if we don't have it invested, then we'll have to pay taxes on it. Again, I said, no, Mom, the money just had to be in the account. Finally, I explained, when my sister and I were teenagers, we had to be home by midnight, but we didn't have to be in our beds by midnight. I drew a chart on a piece of paper and she finally understood. I had a client who was a nurse. I told her about my mom. She said she could be head of medicine at Johns Hopkins, and her mom still wouldn't trust her. Story 32. My cousin moved to Texas from Florida to live with my family. It was Christmas time, and we naturally had tamales around. She started eating a tamale and then complained about how she just didn't like them. We had to explain to her that you're supposed to take the husk off before you eat it. She was almost 30 at the time. Story 33. I worked for the water distribution company for about 5 years in customer service. I had to explain several times why we do not provide hot water. The same applies to billing. Many people do not understand the difference between debit and credit. Story 34. Favorite story. My family went to Abu Dhabi. We have been going there for years. We visited the Sheikh Zayed Mosque as our friends had not seen it yet. Security checks were added at this point where we had to show our passports. We are Austrians, and the lady at security told us that our passports were not valid because our country does not exist. I thought she was joking and explained how it would be possible for us to enter the United Arab Emirates if our country wasn't real. I told a grown woman that Austria is in Europe and we are part of the European Union. She then asked us if we had a French passport instead, as that would be acceptable. I explained how I would have a French passport if we were not French. I was very frustrated at that point. I re-explained that our country is like France, part of the European Union, and we are next to Germany and Italy. At that point, her supervisor stepped in and let us pass. I know that in Arabic Austria has a different name, but still, how and why? Story 35. I once bartended at a brewery and served two customers 2 pints of beer in different glass shapes. The one paying for the drinks smirked at me and said, "We both ordered a pint." I explained that they were both pints, but he laughed and said, "You expect me to believe they're the same? They don't look the same." Took me grabbing two different empty pint glasses, filling one with water, and then pouring the water into the other glass for him to understand the basic concept of volume. Story 36. In the past, when scanners were large A4-size devices, I had to explain that one cannot simply place the screen of a digital camera onto the scanner for the pictures to be scanned. Story 37. I had to explain to a friend of a friend that wind is not created by tree leaves rustling together vigorously. Completing this task without revealing my judgment was nearly impossible. Story 38. Explaining to my wife that the heater in the car draws heat from the thousands of tiny explosions in the engine to warm the car, without costing us more fuel, is a point I have made many times. Wireless thermostats require batteries. As a plumbing and heating engineer, this can be frustrating. Turning on your heating when the thermostat is not set high enough and explaining that it needs to be raised to activate the boiler is something my mother has been doing over the phone since the 1970s for customers, so my father and I didn't have to visit them. Flushing a toilet can be accomplished with a bucket. It is not an emergency. If I've turned off your water, the heating will still function. Radiators do not operate continuously. The heating will turn on when the thermostat calls for it and will shut off when the desired temperature is reached. Radiators do not heat up instantly. A radiator may not become hot at all if it is located farther away than others when the thermostat is satisfied. Heat from the sun will influence a thermostat. Story 39. Not as bad as some others here, but I had to explain to the assistant manager at my job what rubbing alcohol is. She is 50 and has worked in retail for about 30 years. She has never heard of it. Story 40. Not an adult, but still a teenager who should have already known by that age. Pad fell from my bag at school. He saw it and came to me asking what it was because he always saw them in his sister's room, but everyone refused to tell him. I explained what it was and told him it was for the menstrual cycle. I had to explain that too. He had no idea what I was talking about. That's why I firmly believe we need this kind of education in schools. Story 41. In 2014, while working at a computer store, a wealthy-looking woman came in complaining about her Microsoft Surface tablet. She explained that she had no issues at home, but whenever she left, she lost internet access. Initially, I assumed she had the version of the tablet with a SIM card that wasn't set up properly. However, she actually had the standard version. She expected her home Wi-Fi to work everywhere. I spent 15 minutes trying to explain how Wi-Fi works, but she was not receptive. She thought I was treating her like she was ignorant, which may have been true after 20 minutes of her struggle to understand Wi-Fi. Ultimately, she asked to speak to my manager. 20 minutes later, I saw her still arguing with my manager. Story 42. I returned from vacation to numerous emails from one of my vendors because she was unable to contact the shipping company for which I had provided her contact information. She emailed me every day for a week. Upon my return, I reviewed the contact information I had sent her and inquired about the issue she was facing. I had provided her with phone numbers, but she needed an email. I called and obtained an email address for her in just 5 minutes. She was unable to resolve this for a week because she either wouldn't, couldn't, or didn't consider simply picking up the phone. Story 43. I work in project management, and the administrative assistant is now in a technical role. We had to repave a parking lot, which features a storm drain in the center, designed to collect rainwater since it is the lowest point. After the new asphalt was installed, she approached me with concerns about the storm drain sinking. I reviewed the pictures and had to explain how gravity functions and how water drains toward the lowest point. Story 44. I work events alongside my regular job. I truly believe that people leave their brains at the door when they attend events. No matter how much planning is done, The efficient flow of setup, signage, and staff providing instructions, people often appear like lost sheep. It's actually mind-blowing. Story 45. POC immigrant turned citizen lawyer who worked with immigration and citizenship policies in Australia. The number of times I had to patiently explain that someone doing terrible things elsewhere is not permission or validation for us to be relatively less inadequate was staggering. Sometimes multiple steps were required with supporting materials, even for senators. Most of the time, it devolved into personal remarks about how my origin affected my ability or considerations, as if there's had not. The idea that a true citizen would understand came up even from senators. It frustrates me that dealing with the people who determine who obtains citizenship has diminished my love for the country. The worst of them may soon become Prime Minister too. Story 46. My friend and neighbor, a 25-year-old woman, didn't know you had to preheat the oven before using it. I wondered why everything was soggy or undercooked. I couldn't believe it when I realized it. Story 47. If I had $1 for every time I stopped on the side of the highway just to change a stranger's tire, I would have around $10 to $15. Learn how to change a tire, people. Story 48. This has happened many times in the United States. People get their DNA tested and are shocked when it doesn't indicate Mexican, Puerto Rican, or American heritage. I have to explain that we all originated from the other side of the world, except for the native populations, and we mixed and fought to create new ethnicities, countries, and borders. Story 49. 70-year-old aunt. Did you know that the leaves on the trees turn those beautiful colors because they are dying? I had no idea. 35-year-old me. Weren't you a registered nurse for 40 years? Story 50. HIV/AIDS is not exclusively a disease affecting gay individuals. It was a concern for a group of friends in our mid to late 20s. Story 51. I have had to explain to multiple adults that you do not get sunburned more easily on a mountain because you are closer to the sun. It is because the atmosphere is thinner. One person did not believe me. Story 52. To my dad, I don't think he has ever been single. He has a history of being married 5 times and has always relied on women to take care of his bills. His car was recently repossessed, marking his first time being single in 6 months. He didn't pay for the car, and when I asked him if he had been making payments, he responded, "No, that's my ex's job." No, it isn't. I had to teach him how to pay his bills. He always depended on women to handle them for him. He even tried to flirt over the phone to manipulate the situation, so I had to explain that that is not how paying bills works. It is ridiculous. Story 53. You cannot reheat food for prolonged periods. Additionally, do not throw embers in a garbage can. I have more, but I will stop at these 2. Story 54. The cervical cancer vaccine only protects against cervical cancer, which is completely different from herpes, sexually transmitted infections, and human immunodeficiency virus. I also mentioned pregnancy because she was challenging me on the other topics. Story 55. How a greeting card worked. It is fascinating how a piece of paper can be folded in half to create an outside and inside. I experienced one of those moments when my mind struggled to explain such a simple concept to a senior manager at my job. Story 56. I had to explain to adult A that I cannot accept their coupon because it is out of date by a year, and it is not even for our cafe. I also had to explain this to adults B and C, who decided to get involved when adult A started causing a disturbance in my outside seating area and throwing chairs at people. Then, I had to explain to adult D, my area manager, who decided to visit, why I was refusing to comply with their instructions to honor the coupon. This is pretty standard in hospitality. Story 57. I once spent 5 minutes explaining the spelling of my list name to someone. During that time, I spelled it out at least 3 times. My lady's name has 6 letters. This was in college. Story 58. I worked in a call center for the taxation department in my country. An accountant argued with me that his client only had to pay tax on her net annual income and not her gross annual income. Therefore, she had paid too much tax. He claimed that for the 30 years he had been an accountant, you only ever paid tax on net income. I was on a 3-way call with him and his client, and I spent too long trying to explain to her why the accountant was wrong. Unfortunately, She didn't seem to know much about tax or finances, so she didn't believe me. Story 59. I explained to a 35-year-old colleague that Hawaii is far away from the United States and that it is placed on the map for visual clarity, so the map does not cover an entire wall. He did not comment on Alaska. Story 60. Explaining to customers that they need to pay for their mobile phone service, while they are adamant that they have never paid for it. Story 61. I told my brother about my early childhood trauma, and he said we weren't close enough for me to be open about it with him. This made me think about what might be wrong with my inner child and where my adult self is, especially considering he has been a psychiatrist for 20 years. Story 62. I had to teach my coworker that world hunger is still an issue. She thought no one was facing food insecurity. Story 63. I had to explain to someone that daylight saving time means you only lose or gain an hour once a year. It's not every day you lose or gain an hour of sleep. It still baffles me that someone thought otherwise. I understand that daylight saving time can be confusing at times, but this was something else. Story 64. When the 22-year-old girl at my job almost put a metal bowl in the microwave. Good thing I was standing right there to tell her that she can't do that. The look on her face was so confused. Story 65. I explained to a former coworker that the sky doesn't display a different star pattern every night. He believed the stars were in a different position each evening. He was unaware that the moon follows the same path as the sun, rising in the east and setting in the west. He's also the same person who came to believe in the existence of Arctic ticks, which supposedly emerge only in winter and hide well in the snow. He had to look it up to see if I was joking. Story 66. I used to work for a bank in the chargeback non-fraud department. The number of times I had to explain to people that they still had to pay their car loans, even after selling the car or if it broke down, was astonishing. Story 67. I had to explain twice about things being stuck to screens to someone after they called the IT department and complained about unclear error messages on their screens. The first issue was a sticky note that someone had placed on her screen. The second was a faceplate from an exit sign that had fallen to the floor and had leaned against her screen, prompting her to call maintenance to have it put back up. It was confusing trying to understand over the phone why there was a green error and a man running out of a door until I went over to see it for myself. Story 68. I had to spell out for a coworker, who was in his mid-20s at the time, how to spell the word knob. Because I have a sarcastic sense of humor, I told him, K, as in knob, and as in no, it's a doorknob. O, as in oh my God, you can't spell knob? B, as in ball. Story 69. At 4 years old in reception class, I was required to correct my teacher's pronunciation of Archaeopteryx and inform her that she had poured my cognac into the wrong type of drinking vessel. Story 70. A while ago, I had to explain to a customer on the phone what a business day is. Took 10 long minutes, and I still don't think he fully understood by the time the call ended. Story 71. People say they have two twins, not two sets of twins, just two twins. Many people thought they came in sets of 4. I have two twins, Billy M. and Johnny M., both 7 years old. Who knew that twins born on the same day would be the same age? What a coincidence. Story 72. An ex of mine told me that if a woman isn't a virgin when she gets married, she is supposed to wear a pink sash on her wedding dress. I asked how it was anyone else's business whether she was a virgin or not, and why she would have to signal the state of her sexual experience on her wedding day. Well, his grandmother told him that non-virgin brides always wear a pink sash. To this day, I have never seen a bride wear a pink sash, even women I know who are on their second wedding. Story 73. A lady working at a tech store had to fetch her colleague because something was wrong with the keyboard. It could only type in asterisks. She was entering a password to log in to her employee computer account. Story 74. I had to explain to a young lady that nuclear weapons are indeed a significant threat and that they remain functional. It was akin to meeting a real-life Philomena Kunk. Story 75. I live in Japan and have been asked several times if foreigners experience stiff shoulders. I speak Japanese at home, so it wasn't a language issue. I have been left speechless each time. Story 76. A colleague, age 32, Did not know where Russia is or that it is bigger than our home country, Denmark. Denmark is a neighbor of Russia. Story 77. My partner's brain turns to mush when she gets especially bad migraines. I recently had to explain that cars can be locked without keys present. She didn't understand until her migraine subsided. Story 78. I had to explain to a girl I knew, who was 20 years old, that she could possibly be pregnant, even if she didn't have an orgasm. She kept expressing her concerns about her late period and feeling weird, insisting that she couldn't possibly be pregnant because only her boyfriend finished. However, she was indeed pregnant and very shocked by it. I haven't spoken to her in about 12 years, but I occasionally see her and her child, and it always makes me reflect on how sexual education should cover the topics that kids actually need to understand. Story 79. I worked at an emergency veterinary clinic, and a client got upset because her dog had a bump on its head when they were leaving. I tried to explain that the bump was, in fact, the dog's skull. My local bartender was in the lobby and laughed with me about it the next time I went to the bar, which made me feel better. Story 80. Leap years. I dated a girl who simply couldn't comprehend that it takes approximately 365.25 days for Earth to orbit the Sun. We add an extra day to the calendar every 4 years. She didn't understand why we didn't have a shorter day every year. She fundamentally didn't grasp basic astronomy. I tried diagrams and different-sized fruit to explain it. In the end, she said she understood. But I knew she didn't and had gotten bored. We broke up the following week. Story 81. Them politicians lie, Me, I know that includes yours. Please actually look at their voting records. Story 82. I had to explain to my cousin that Hitler was a real person, not just a character in movies. She attended good schools, but sadly, the education system fails many students. Story 83. A few years ago, I was sitting with my friend's roommate, making small talk. I mentioned how fall was finally coming and how excited I was. She had the most shocked look on her face and asked me how I could tell fall was approaching. I stared at her for a moment before realizing she was dead serious. I casually pointed out the window and said, "It's September, and the leaves on the trees are changing color." Again, with a shocked look on her face, she said she had no idea that different colored leaves were related to fall. I couldn't believe I was explaining seasons to someone in their late 20s. Story 84. I work in a restaurant. Several of our pasta dishes include chicken. We offer baked chicken and breaded chicken. When a customer orders a dish with chicken, I ask whether they prefer baked or breaded chicken. It's not just one person. About 25% of customers ask what the difference is. The same applies to our cheese or meat ravioli. Story 85. I once watched my 58-year-old dad open his phone browser, type google.com, and then search for Yahoo Mail, where he navigated to eventually find the login. When he finished sifting through his spam, he closed the browser tab before putting his phone down, ensuring the same wild experience would be in store for the next email check. Couldn't believe it. Story 86. A woman believed that the paint I sold her was defective. When I asked her why, she said the can it came in was dented. After reassuring her that the paint should be fine, she wanted to know exactly why it wouldn't be damaged. I proceeded to explain the principles of physics to this woman. These individuals have the right to vote. Story 87. The intravenous pump that my unit clerk retrieved from Central Supply, which had a broken note taped to it, was indeed broken. Story 88. I worked the night shift at a group home and was training a new hire. I told her the cleaning duty was to do a deep clean of the stove, and I left her to it while I attended to something else. When I came back, I saw her arm shoved into the hole where the burners go, trying to clean under the stovetop. When I explained that the top of the stove lifted up, she said, "Oh, that makes so much sense." She told me that at her last rental, a baking dish had shattered, and she had spent hours trying to get all the pieces out using this method before giving up and leaving glass under the stovetop for years. She was 40 years old, had lived alone for years, and had no learning or developmental disabilities. She had never thought to search online or check if there was an easier way. This is one of many basic things I had to explain to someone a decade older than me. Story 89. When I was 20 and training someone in their late 20s at a chicken restaurant kitchen, this person had worked in the service area for about 5 months, so they knew the menu items well. While making a meal, they asked me how many tenders to put in a three-finger combo. I looked confused and asked, "What?" because I thought I misunderstood their question. When they repeated it, I answered 3 and went back to my work. My manager later told me that the person was upset because I looked at him like he was stupid, when I was just confused about what he was asking. The manager didn't mind. She just talked to me to make him feel better, and we laughed about it. Story 90. Just because someone has a higher degree, even multiple doctorates, does not mean they know everything. A woman was baffled that her fully grown husband, who held several degrees, did not know that women do not pee out of their vagina. None of his degrees were in biology, reproduction, or female anatomy. Her assumption that he would automatically absorb information outside his field of study simply because he incurred significant debt to earn his degrees is truly beyond me. Story 91. The exhaust from his car is much more pronounced during the cold seasons. I still married him. My mistake. I am currently working hard on that divorce. Story 92. I explained the exact procedure my husband underwent for his vasectomy. He understood the process, but his coworkers were asking detailed questions, and he couldn't recall the precise terminology for the anatomy. They wondered, "What happens when you climax? Does anything come out now?" He could answer these questions, but wanted to provide a more specific explanation for better understanding. Story 93. I have explained to my adult daughter several times that saying, "I could care less" means she does have some cares left to give. Whereas if she says, "I couldn't care less," it indicates she has zero cares to give. Every time she says it, I want to squirt her with a water bottle like we did to the cat when training him not to scratch the couch. Story 94. I had to talk to a family member about their child not washing her hands after using the bathroom. The family member said that they don't enforce it at home because the adults also don't wash their hands. I asked them, "Do you wonder if that's why you're sick all the time?" It was like a bomb went off in their mind. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.